Welcome, folks. Like other episode, this is the next episode of Humans Behind AI, where we explore the people who are moving the ball forward in the artificial intelligence space, either as an entrepreneur or as a technical lead or a executive. How are they moving the story of artificial intelligence forward? And we try to understand through the stories the journeys of various successful individuals in this episode. And today I'm extremely proud and privileged to invite an old friend, probably for my friend for two decades, who has shown me a lot of interesting things in the space. Who was, and I'll not do justice to his, but who was a scientist, a professor, executive, an entrepreneur, and now an author. So very glad to invite Alok Agarwal, Dr. Alok Agarwal, to the show, and we'll invite actually Alok to tell us more about you, your journey, your steps, and what brought you to where you are.
Thanks, Puneet. Thanks for having me. Yes, it has been at least 2 decades, if not more, that we know each other now. When we met in New York City, when I had just started the previous company, ValueServe. So I came to US in 1980, did my PhD in electrical engineering, computer science, but it was actually in theory of computer vision. For people who may not know this, actually AI started in 1950 with a paper from Alan Turing called The Imitation Game. We'll discuss that probably later. I did my PhD and then in 1984 from Johns Hopkins University. Then I spent 16 years at IBM Watson Research Center. As Puneet mentioned, I initially wanted to be a professor. So I wrote a lot of research papers during 1984 to 89, taught at MIT for a year, had 2 PhD students, but then realized that actually teaching was not my cup of tea. There was just so much additional paperwork, admissions committees, other committees, proposals to be written that we did not have to write in IBM research. So I came back. We were very lucky in 1993. One of the CEOs from a paper mill in Portland, Maine, so up north, he came down. He said, look, I've heard a lot about you guys, and I would like you to improve my paper mill from end to end, namely from the point paper pulp is put into the system to the point that the paper is provided to New York Times and Rolling Stones and so on. And we told him that we do not know anything about paper as how it's produced, the subject matter expertise and all that. And he said, well, that's not a bad thing. You come over for 3 months, spend time in our guest house, you'll understand everything about paper. So we did end up spending 2.5 months in cold Maine, and then came down, and next year we actually produced using what is called meta learning, or what was already called meta learning in AI. We produced an end-to-end solution, which actually improved his paper mill by about 1.5%. So given the revenue was 600 million, it improved it by about 9 million in savings. And it was so good that not only did they buy it, they actually ran the entire system. It was called the paper mill scheduling system for 24 years till it was sold to a Norwegian company in 2017. So we sold it to a few other companies, but then I moved on to join the strategy group. 2 strategies came out. IBM Research had just lost, or IBM had just lost Deep Blue to Kasparov once. So the idea was to play again so that even if we break even, that will be a good marketing ploy for us. No different than the marketing ploys that happen all the time, for example, with GPTs that currently and so on. And of course, as you probably know, Deep Blue won against Kasparov in 1997. So that was really 1996. So that was a really good thing. And the second one was to set up an IBM India research lab. So that was my first foray into becoming an entrepreneur, because my boss, who is the head of research, Paul Horn, said, look, you're on a 3-year assignment, expat assignment, and here is X million of dollars. You can spend it if you need it more. As long as you're doing the right thing, I'll give you more. So I had the option, literally, you can call it a Series A funding, without, of course, getting any equity in return, but it was a fun stuff. Started IBM India Research Lab, rented space from IIT Delhi, which actually gave us a full building. and grew it to 30 PhDs, 30 masters during 1998 to 2000, doing natural language processing, machine learning, many other things. By the way, most of our projects failed, just to be very clear. So like any entrepreneur, it wasn't that everything that you do works. Then I quit, joined with another person. We started a company called EvalueServe, and gave a new subsector of outsourcing called knowledge process outsourcing. EvalueServe is still going on. Mark Pollenweider, who was the co-founder, is still running it. It's about 5,000 people worldwide. But I decided to go back to my roots in 2014 and started this company called Scry Analytics Inc. Now Scry AI, AI for, of course, artificial intelligence. Also, AI is an abbreviation for Analytics Inc. And just, I will talk about more about the company later probably, but more about Scry. The word is an English word. Many people, when they read it, they say it's scary, and maybe AI is scary for many, but it means actually crystal ball gazing. So you can use it in Scrabble, convert try to scry. It means predicting the future. So Nostradamus is considered the biggest scryer because he wrote all these quatrains about predicting what will happen in 2020, 2050, and so on. Since we are doing predictive analytics, we are predicting whether a machine will go down, whether a railroad car will go down, wheels will go down, whether a person will return his mortgage back or her mortgage back, whether an SMB will default on the loan. So we are predicting in many ways, many of the use cases are about predicting the future and then prescribing as to how to potentially mitigate side effects of what will happen. So that's when we started in 2014. We are about 10 years old, and we are a product company. So we are creating a lot of products.
Perfect, Alok. Thank you for that. Now, going back to Alok, and your professional life, of course, is the one that grabs attention. I know I'm going to ask you an unfair question. It's like choosing who's your favorite kid, but I'm going to ask it, Alok. And the question is, among all your incarnations, which is the one that is most Alok, that really is Alok? If you had no other criteria, which one would be the one that you would choose?
As you rightly said, it's an unfair question asking who's your favorite kid. And suppose you have two kids, then it's almost impossible. Even if you have more, probably it's still impossible. I've actually thought a lot about that myself. And I think effectively a combination. Who is Alok? I think Alok is not an entrepreneur, to be very honest. Alok is effectively a researcher at heart and a builder at heart. I like building things, and I like to do research and understand what is it, where can we move the needle in terms of knowledge in various ways. So I think it's a combination. Maybe my right hand is research and my left hand is building, or vice versa, not to differentiate between right and left, and be ambidextrous about it.
Okay, very interesting, Alok. Alok, there's another question for you. That I got to know when you were starting EvalueServe. EvalueServe encapsulated many things at an entrepreneurial vision. It was even industry defining, right? Between KPO, you may remember I was with Inductis. We were trying to define data analytics. You were defining the KPO. So what was the genesis? What brought you to say one more time, I'll go down to trenches and build Scry? Because you had done it, and you had done it very successfully. So what was the impetus? Because also calling you out on that, you are not an entrepreneur, you said, at heart, not like the first choice. So what was the genesis of you going back to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, one of the main reason is the following, and I very strongly believe that people should not have regrets. And a lot of the things that I did in the last 10 years, and I'll probably do in the next 5, by the time I'm 70, is to get rid of all the regrets I have and achieve what I'm not able to achieve earlier. So one of the regrets was, as I mentioned about this anecdote about paper mills. After this paper mill became so successful in 1993, in 1995, we were selling to other companies, paper companies, and so on, and a couple of them bought it. But what we realized was that IBM Research did not have any salespeople. And so we were not only building it, we were selling it. And the person with whom I was developing happened to be an Indian. I said to Sesh, why don't we go and start a company in Silicon Valley? You be the chief technology officer, I be the chief operating officer. We'll find some CEO, we'll find some money. And his answer was that, boss, your wife is a medical doctor. She can bring food to the table. My wife is a Bharatanatyam dancer and teacher. I'll have to bring food to the table. So I cannot leave at this point. And that particularly stuck with me that, look, there should be a company which provides products in AI. And eventually, this was a discussion with the co-founder of Evalueserve, Mark Wollenweider, in 2013. And I told Mark that, look, I will not feel satisfied if I do not start a company doing products in AI. And if I look at my life, I finished my research and my education in 1984 when I was 25. And Mark, the maximum, God willing, I'll work till 70. So I have 45 years. The first roughly 16 years I spent in IBM research. The next 14 years I spent in Evalueserve. So I have only 15 more years left. So I have only one more inning to play. And I better get rid of my regret of that kind. And that was the starting point. And that's why Scry AI is actually, in some sense, if you ask me the real question, what is it? I would say it's an R&D company with salespeople. Because if I very strongly feel that if IBM Research, Bell Labs, Xerox PARC, and today Google DeepMind, they have their own salespeople, these particular organizations by themselves would be trillion-dollar valuation companies because there is so much innovation that comes out of it. But that innovation remains either in patents or in research papers. And because the salespeople do not understand how to sell it, like in our times, they were selling AS400s and other servers. That's a common problem that we see. So this is hopefully trying to achieve that. Maybe an audacious goal, but a goal nevertheless.
Yeah. In fact, that leads to one very interesting point I'm sure me and the audience will like to know, is that what is the first of all, knowing you, Alok, I think you have much more than 5 years left. So let's not get ourselves.
We shall see. That's not in our hands, right? I mean, that is how nature decides.
Yes. But what is the future vision, given that, Scry is somewhere, Alok is somewhere, and we will touch upon your authorship in a bit. But what is the future vision? I mean, what is the thing that, let's say we were having this discussion, let's say 5 years from now, what would be the points there that will make you satisfied? What can you tell me then, which would be satisfactory?
As I said, since we are an R&D company, the thing is that most of what is happening in AI or machine learning is kind of the same thing over and over again. So you have a lot of people doing intelligent document processing, but they're basically very close to each other. And the question is, can you move the ball really forward, not only in research, but in commercialization? For example, everyone, and it's to a certain extent correct also, that you do optical character recognition, convert a page or a scanned document into an electronic format. There will be some errors, and therefore you may require humans. And that's the general theory and the general viewpoint in AI today, that look, you will have some errors, and therefore there should be a human in the loop. And I'm not saying there should not be a human in the loop. I mean, even with humans, if you're doing something very important, for example, accounting or finance, usually there is a maker who would make an income statement, and there is a checker who would check that to make sure that the first person has not made a mistake. But the question is, just like humans, can you make sure that most of it goes straight through processing? That let's say I am given now 100 documents. Out of that, 90 documents, I don't really require a human. How do we do that as humans? We have essentially two eyes. If I close my right eye and from my left eye, I say it's Puneet. And then I close my left eye and from my right eye, I say it's Puneet. And let's assume for the timing, we don't understand how the human brain works, but let's assume both eyes are acting independently. Then my probability of error goes down substantially. For example, if my probability of error in the right eye being Puneet was 90% and the left eye is 90%, then both highs being wrong is only 0.1%. So I have increased my probability of error from 10% or reduced it from 10% to 1%. And that is to me a very important aspect, that can we do more and more without humans in the loop? And this problem which I've explained with intelligent document processing is the problem which is very, very common across all of AI world. And the thing is, again, if you look at what is the rage today, transformers and large language models against the last mile problem, people haven't solved the last mile. I mean, yes, for text it is very good, but it fails on IIT exams. I'm not taking IIT exams as any kind of a baseline, but it will fail in reading SEC reports on 10Ks and 10Qs and so on. And can you do it so that you know exactly what is right and what is wrong, so that you can, so that most of it goes straight through processing? It says, for example, going back to income statement, suppose in the system you can figure out, because every accountant writes the income statement slightly different. But suppose the AI system, just like humans, it learns that A plus B plus C equals D with accountant A, and it's not a form, it learns automatically. If a new accountant comes in, it figures out A plus G plus H will add up to, let's say, Z or Y. If it is able to figure that out, and now it sees that A plus B plus C is equal to D, and there A plus G plus H is equal to Z, then it doesn't have to, then that's the second I. The formula, it has learned the formula, so you don't need the human. So I can now tell you where exactly has the intelligent document processing system gone wrong and where it is right. And that's the kind of thing I'm looking for to really move the needle. Okay, bottom line is, I'm hoping with Scry that we are able to move the needle in ways that people may be thinking or may not be thinking, but which will be partly research and advanced development, and of course, commercialization of it very quickly.
Got it. Makes sense. And I'll simplify, Alok, is that anything that we can not totally rely on will continue to be a sideshow. And in your book, you refer to electricity, motors. Electricity will not be used if today we thought it will be working, not working. So there's a certain degree of reliability that has to come in before some things become truly mainstream. And I'm using mainstream because your fourth industrial revolution, which I'll come to, I could see a theme of things became mainstream. Things were not like intellectual or research topic. They were everywhere. In fact, people who did not know they were there. The coffee machine has a chip. You won't think of that, right? So those kind of things. But Alok, before we move on to the...
You're absolutely right. And this is the thing that I think we will need, what I call as trust. When can we start trusting AI systems? Now, if the AI system has hallucinations, or if you come to me, you have a company which produces intelligent document processing systems using AI, and you come to me, look, my system is 90% correct. My immediate question is, Puneet, that's great, your system is 90% correct, but can you tell me where should I be looking, or where my data analyst should be really looking where it's wrong? Or do they have to review the whole the entire document? Because if the entire document is a quarterly report or an annual report, it could be easily 300 pages. You're really not solved my problem. But if you could tell me out of these 300 pages, it's 90% correct, so you have to only look at these 30 pages or maybe even 50 pages, suddenly I know that, look, I can trust it, and I have reduced my time. And ultimately, it's only about a few KPIs, a few key performance indicators that everyone cares about. You can reduce my time, you can improve my quality, you can reduce my cost, you can improve my user experience. Things haven't changed. I mean, it's not that AI suddenly thrown us in a different world. The KPI still remain a KPI. And tomorrow, if Puneet comes, hey, I can still solve your intelligent document processing system, not using AI, but using God or using Devil, and it is 99% correct, I'll still buy it. Because as long as your price is right, I'll still buy it. And that is something which we have to all understand very carefully and clearly.
Got it, got it. So Alok, now I'll go into three dimensions, right? One is Alok as an entrepreneur. Second is Alok as an AI expert. And third is Alok as a human, in that order. So first one is Alok. I'm talking to Alok as an entrepreneur, primarily an entrepreneur. You can't separate those things. So Alok, one thing which my work and my passion is around entrepreneurs. That's what just triggers me. So tell me, what were the, and I recently saw the movie Inside Out with my kids, which is about emotions, right? So can you tell us about, to the budding entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs which are halfway there, what is your view on, what is your advice on which emotions to manage and which emotions to focus on? And I'm keeping it ambivalent because I want you to tell me rather than me to tell you.
I think this is a hard question. I think it depends from one person to another. My own view is that it also depends on what kind of a company you are creating. Because product companies have fundamentally different DNA than services companies. What Evaluaserve is a services company. My wife is a medical doctor, she's in services. Services people, consultants, doctors, accountants, they by and large, they eat what they kill. That is, hey, I'm selling so much right now, and that's why I'm going to get it. Whereas product companies have to wait a fair bit of time before the product is really good and they can sell it, and they will go through many more, I would say, negative feedback from the clients and from others than services companies. But because you can modify, you can train your people and modify their behavior much more than you can create a product overnight. It takes much more time to create. So you tell me that, look, these things I don't see, these are the features I want. For me to add those features, then to test them, do proper software engineering takes time. So I think depending on what you are doing, you should be very clear with the intent. The intent is probably the most important thing in life anyway. Okay, you're trying to do something. I want to be an entrepreneur, but so what? What after that? And you say, look, I want to do a services company, then you should be a services company. Trying to be a product company and a services on top of a services company are mixing two DNAs, which are not really compatible. Now, with product companies, you can add a services layer, which is a professional services of some kind. So that is one thing I would strongly encourage entrepreneurs to really think about. Going back to Hindu philosophy and yoga, have an intent, be very clear. I mean, not for the sake because Puneet is taking you to get Series B funding or whatever, but be very clear what really is your mission and vision. And let's be very true to vision and vision. Second would be that by and large, be an entrepreneur because you're passionate about building, about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is eventually about building. Do not just do it because you want to be a millionaire or a billionaire or a trillionaire, because that is not in your hands. Well, we all know that 80 to 90% of companies will fail. And even those which succeed might have gone through many failures during the period and may go through, eventually all companies die. That's a fact. The question is not if, but when. Now, many of these companies which are startups die very early. So you have to be careful as to what you're building and be patient about it. And there, at that particular point, it's very important to have the right kind of people who are funding you, who understand it. Because with all due respects to VCs and PEs, many of them tend to be financial engineers and do not understand what the company is all about. They're themselves acting like lemmings. Okay, AI is great, let's fund AI today. Or yesterday, driverless cars was great, let's fund driverless. Now, there are, of course, many VCs and PEs who do understand and who do diligence on this. And these are three things which I think would be very important. Have a clear intent. Do not go with just a money aspect, but be passionate as to what you want to do and why you want to do it. And have the right partner, whoever your co-founders are, as well as the right funders, investors in the picture. And do not fret on a day-to-day basis. You will have many highs and lows. Just be calm as you can.
Very well said, Alok. And in that, in the same spirit, Alok, what was the period, time, or a moment, or maybe a couple of moments where you were really doubtful that, man, why did I do this, or why I'm stuck in it? Tell me kind of a couple of situations. And reason I bring that up is all entrepreneurs, all of us have faced times where we felt like giving up. Now, for some reason, we didn't give up. But I do want the audience to hear from you. Where did you feel like giving up, and why did you not give up?
So Evalueserve, frankly, in 2000, when we had Great Recession, we were growing in Evalueserve at one point, literally doubling every year as a services company between 2004 and 2008. Then came the Great Recession, and we were even thinking of going IPO in India or in the US at that time within 2 or 3 years. And then a recession came, the Great Recession came. And because most of our clients were either investment banks or consulting companies, strategy consulting companies, large, medium, small, that basically the bottom fell off. And we were literally first year, we did not grow at all. And the second year only by 15%. And at that time, interestingly, the data science had just started. And I was keeping a good track of data science. And that time I thought of giving up and saying, Mark, why don't you run it in 2009? And I'll go and start a company, or I'll join some company. In fact, Google was quite interested at that time because of various reasons in hiring. I do not know whether I would have joined Google. I had already had enough of a large company like IBM. But yeah, that was one of the times when definitely I felt, man, this is not going. I do not know how long the recession will last. I do not know even how long the banks would last. Did not give it up because two reasons. One, if it had lasted for another couple of years, I might have given up. Frankly, fortunately, the Great Recession only lasted 2 years. That was one. Secondly, I think it becomes hard to give up after some point. If you have a very strong heart attack very early on as a company in the first 2 or 3 years, it's much easier. But when you have put in 7 or 8 years of your life and you say, look, I've already come this way, these highs and lows will come. It's a much harder thing. There is some amount of inertia. And of course, the passion to continue, how can I give up, is always there. The passion is ultimately what drives us. Passion is what keeps us in many ways alive. And passion is what I think makes us not retire from whatever we are doing.
Very nice, Alok. Very nice. So Alok, let me now switch to a very, very interesting, cool topic these days, right? In living rooms, apart from politics and predicting how world economy would be, artificial intelligence is the topic, right? Especially in our circles, right? The whole left brain circles. So first of all, I was fortunate enough to go through your book, which you wrote. So my first question is that with all the things going on and having written many research papers, what writing a book? Pretty big book, by the way, and pretty detailed book. So what made the author in our book?
Again, as I said, a lot of what I'm doing is getting rid of the regrets of my life. So this also goes back to regret. And that regret, the previous regret was in 1995. And I'm going backwards in the regrets and filling my regrets first in, last out, so to speak. My second regret happened when I was teaching at MIT. So as I mentioned earlier, my research was mainly in the theory of computer vision called computational geometry. So I was teaching 2 courses at MIT on computational geometry. This is 1988 or 89, 88 and 89. And the students, of course, these were masters and PhD students. They were remarkable. They were extremely good. So every lecture, they would scribe the notes as to what I taught. Unfortunately, before that, there was no book in computational geometry written. Computational geometry as a field, theory of computer vision, literally started around 1973-75 timeframe. And everyone would refer to a PhD thesis from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So while these guys were writing notes and they were so clear, I thought I should write a book. So in any author's usual way, you write a table of contents. There were 23 chapters. You write what will be the title of each of these sections. So I wrote all of those. I went to McGraw-Hill and Springer Verlag, the two publishers who publish such books, and both were very interested because obviously there was nothing there. And one of them even gave me a contract right away. Why don't you sign? We will give you $20,000 up front, then you can finish the book in 1 to 2 years. So I fortunately or unfortunately said, let me write the first chapter and see whether I can do a good job. It took me 110 hours to write it. I realized that this whole book will take 2,500 hours. And if I do that, then that's a full year. IBM will fire me, or if I join a university, they will fire me, and I decided not to pursue it. 3 years later, a fairly good friend at that time, and even now, Leo Gibas, who is a professor of Stanford, he was in theory of computer vision. Now he runs the computer vision laboratory at Stanford University. He came out with a book 3 years later in 1993-94. Out of the 26 chapters he had, 21 had the same literally titles and content, which I was thinking. And I felt really bad. I mean, I felt good that at least somebody had written it. I felt bad that I had. So so this was the second time when I felt that people really do not understand AI. AI either is, people are very optimistic, we are at artificial general intelligence, or they're very pessimistic and so on. So I wrote 4 papers in 2018, which, and these articles are on the net, and there are 4 professors who started using in their MBA courses. So actually my wife convinced me that, look, you have a regret, why don't you write a book? So I started writing the book in January 2021, and it again took almost 2,400 hours. But the aim was to demystify and above all, to get rid of my second regret.
So Alok, first of all, I appreciate your candor. You were not out to change the world. You were out to, one of the prime reasons was what you wanted to do. And that is, I see consistent theme. In hindsight, people have, a different explanation of their actions. But sometimes actions are driven by very good reasons, but many reasons are personal, as you highlighted. So a few things on this. Now I'm diving into AI as a broader pitch, and I borrowed from what I read in your book and otherwise. And I'm hopefully reflecting many members of audience who would, it's a very interesting topic, right? Because movies have been made from Isaac Asimov, if you remember the guy, to, now moves are made, Sophia and others, right? So it's a pretty interesting RoboCop, all Terminator. So there's a pretty interesting field. So one thing, Alok, will be very useful for us to know is that, let's say we were living 15 years from now, and AI is on its way. How would the life be? It's almost like I'm asking in 2000, how would the internet change? Now you order Uber, you don't even see a salesperson. So what would be life like with the new 4th industrial revolution, let's say 15 years in? Tell us some highlights, some interesting highlights, what you see happening.
So I think that's always a very hard, whenever we are in an industrial revolution, and this is, as I write in the book, we are in the 4th industrial revolution, which is, according to me, started in 2011. The fact that we are in the 4th industrial revolution was already mentioned first by Klaus Schwab, who is the head of World Economic Forum about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even earlier than that. It's very hard to figure out once technology seeps into the society, which by 2040, I think a lot of AI will begin to seep into the society. A lot of AI use cases or AI systems are already in the society without us realizing, but there will be many more use cases which will seep into the society. Because there is a Cambrian explosion of AI systems. It's like electric motors. I mean, people may not realize there are 3,500 different types of electric motors today. So in my view, by 2050, we would have 100,000 different types of AI systems. Already, I'm actually writing another short, I mean, not necessarily short, but another article which will be on our website about 1,000 use cases of AI, which are already in operation, which are already productionized. So my own view is not only about AI, but about the 4th industrial revolution. there will be a lot of changes that would have seeped into the society. For example, gene editing is one of the very big things that we talk about sometimes and we do not talk about other times, which would have seeped into the society. Another one would be flying cars. We do not talk much about flying cars, but more or less in the next 5 years, the likelihood of flying cars becoming more common is much more likelihood is there than driverless cars, because the fundamental computer science or technological issues with driverless cars still are quite a lot, not necessarily with flying cars, because you're flying in 3 dimensions, so you don't have to worry so much about traffic. So just like internet, who would have, I mean, as I said, I was in 1996, 97 in IBM strategy. As part of IBM research, I was in the strategy group. We used to wonder as to, look, we are creating all this internet, we're creating these algorithms, their systems, but we don't even have broadband connection. So who would know? And then came the whole broadband boom, and investors got all excited, and we had the .com and the boom and the telecom boom. $500 billion was spent in laying cables undersea, in ground, and so on. And then by 2004, 40% of Americans had broadband cable in their houses. By 2009, the wireless was there. And who would have known in 2005 that we would have, or 2004, that we would have a social media movement with Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all of the other ones, Instagram, etc., that we have today? And who would have known that we would all get addicted, or most of us will get addicted to this particular social media? This happens with all industrial revolutions. There are some effects which are very hard to predict upfront. It's very hard for me to predict. I mean, I can say more or less that, look, I do think flying cars will be there in 2040. I do think gene editing will fundamentally change how agriculture is done. Coffee, you don't have to create decaffeinated coffee. You will just create decaffeinated coffee beans itself, grow them, rather than going through the whole process of decaffeinating the beans later. AI, similarly, a lot of the predictive analytics work will be there. A lot of the work related to languages will be done by these systems. I mean, hopefully we would have solved the machine hallucination problem by then. So, but very hard to really say and be correct about the unintended consequences, most of which are the good ones, but there are some bad ones also by 2040 of this revolution.
Got it. And, understood. And, I was more looking at Scryer in you than analyst in you. Of course, you don't know.
Me too. I mean, even while writing the book, I was looking at the Scryer in me, and I mean, I could not answer that question. And then I realized that nobody could answer about the second industrial revolution or the first industrial revolution either. So after, for example, in the second industrial revolution, there was a big hype about railroads. The first railroad, the train started, Stevenson started between Liverpool and Manchester in 1830. And it was so, they were early adopters, as we now understand. And there were so many early adopters that there were people who, the trains would go full, and there would be people sitting on the roofs of the train just to enjoy the new experience, right? I mean, we're not, we're used to it because we come from India, and we saw even in 2,000 people sitting on top of the roofs of the train. So it's not something that's surprising to us. Everyone, the inventors got so excited, the investors got so excited, they all put in so much money. So many railroad tracks were laid out in Britain, in England, the United Kingdom, that's in US. And most of these went bankrupt by 1900. And the prices came down. Now, the effect of the prices coming down is you had suddenly Procter and Gamble coming up, and Sears and others, who realized they could produce actually material in Ohio, which is an inexpensive place, and ship it and still be profitable after shipping it to New York City, which is a much more costly place. But who would have thought? I mean, the trains were originally meant to ferry people around fast, not for freight purposes. So this has happened in various industrial revolutions. Very hard to predict.
But one can borrow from the three prior one that you illustrate very well in your book. And one cannot probably know exactly, but one can, like you highlighted. In fact, one interesting documentary comes to mind, as you said, is The Man Who Built America. That shows a impact of those industrial revolution, I think, second one, very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now switching to other side of it, which is very exciting side, and a lot of movies and a lot of books are written on it, is what scares you about AI? I mean, you hear people saying doomsday scenario and other things, but what scares you if you were to say the things that scare you about AI?
So first of all, yeah, I mean, this has been, I'd like to go back to 1950s. So Alan Turing wrote a research paper called The Imitation Game. I mean, he didn't call it, but it got to be called as The Imitation Game. The paper was, suppose there is computer. Remember, in 1950, there was no semiconductors. So computers were still being made out of what we call valves. And valves are nothing but your typical light bulbs, except that the air has been taken out so that they fuse less, but they still fuse a lot. And that is how the first electronic computer called ENIAC, Electronic Numerical and Integrated Calculator, computer came out. And it is during that time, Alan Turing posed the following problem. Suppose there is a computer sitting in one room, there is a man sitting in another room, and in the third room, there is a judge sitting. And they both the computer and the man are talking to the judge by using cables, electric cables. Then the computer imitate the man into fooling the judge that it is actually the man, that the judge is fooled that it is actually the man. And this is why the computer is imitating the man. And this became the fundamental Turing test. And the computer is becoming so intelligent that it can fool the judge. Alan Turing did not give the name AI that was given later on in 1955. Yeah. So starting in 1952, in fact, there was a BBC interview with Alan Turing, and they asked him, when do you think this will happen? And he said, not for 100 years. So he already believed that by 2052, it's not likely to happen. So this was the strier in Alan Turing. He was predicting that what I'm asking may not happen for 100 years. The next question they asked was, and how do you think it will happen? And he says, unlike what we are thinking about algorithms and about our computers today, which are deterministic, these computers will be child machines. We'll have to train them like children, that they change their algorithms internally. So both of them, he was completely correct. And what happened after that was in 1960s, the entire thing went through the first hype cycle. And believe me, hype cycle was at least as much as it is today. So it was so much that the first real movie about the hype of AI came in 1966. Called 2001 Space Odyssey. And those of you who haven't seen it, I would recommend the audience to see, because that actually provides a computer called HAL 9000, who is the artificially general intelligent computer. And the reason it's 2001 is many of the researchers and pioneers of AI at that time believed that by 2000, we would have computers who would have beaten humans pretty much in all walks of life. One of them was Marvin Minsky, very well-known AI researcher, one of the top 10, I would say, researchers in the world in the field of AI. So this hype has been always there. In 1970s, there was a lot of discussion. So there were these guys like Marvin Minsky. I mean, we have similar people today. We can discuss those also, who are saying, oh, in the next 10 years, next 20 years, every time we come around, they will give you the next 10 years, we'll have artificial general intelligence. Interestingly, that time is always a rolling time, because coming 2020, 2030, we'll have artificial general intelligence. And then you have the doomsayers, and then who would say, no, you're far away from that, relax. So there was so Marvin Minsky was a professor at MIT. There was another professor, Dreyfus, who was coming from sociology, psychology, and also understood computer science fairly well. And Dreyfus wrote a book around that time called AI and Alchemy, that you're literally selling snake oil when you're saying that AI will be as smart as humans. And he gave a lot of reasons. I have very briefly summarized in the book also. So this has been going on, first of all, for a long time. I mean, there is nothing new. And that's part of the reason why I go into history, not because history is only interesting because it has stories to tell that we can learn from, not because it has dates associated. Who cares whether AI was coined in 1955 or 1960? But what matters is what were the people discussing, and are people discussing anything different? So, keeping that in mind, with that preface, I'm not worried about job losses because, as I write in the book, in all industrial revolutions, things take time. Even the best inventions take time to seep into the society. For example, Edison created the first electricity production plant in Buffalo or close to Buffalo in 1882. But only after 43 years in 1925 did half of the Americans got electricity. Now, of course, the time is reducing, but it still takes time for us to basically have inventions, especially if they're so fundamental and if they require so much capital to seep into the society. Yeah, it's very easy to throw away BlackBerry and buy a smartphone instead because it was only about $400, $500 at that time. BlackBerry was already 200. It's much harder when you're talking about billions of dollars that you're investing, and companies are always loath to do that. But so I'm not that worried about job losses. They will happen for sure. And I write about a full chapter about that. By 2050, we'll probably have 400 million people losing their jobs to AI. But by 2050, we'll also have a population of the world which would be stagnating. Many people would be more older than they are right now. Many people will be many fewer people will be there who will be doing work, who would be workers. So we probably need AI and robots to help us out to do the remaining. I'm more worried about the aspects of social media right now on humans, given how addicted we all have become, and would actually want to bring out Dr. Murthy, who is Vivek Murthy, who's the Surgeon General here. He has repeatedly brought out, and in fact, he brought out a very big report about loneliness, where he brings out some of the aspects of social media and how we are, as humans, we are talking more to computers and through social media to each other than directly. And over the last many, many million years, we have been always hanging around with other humans and so on. And you're suddenly taking that away. It's probably built into our DNA at this point. That's why COVID was such a hard thing for everyone. That's why today all the flights, you go try to go anywhere, the flights are over. So because people missed meeting people. So I think that loneliness, as he brings out very clearly, he, in fact, being a researcher at heart, he uses various research articles to say that, look, the loneliness, severe loneliness is as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And social media is one of the very big factors which is causing, because we're talking to people not directly, but through social media. And we do not even know who is on the other side. I believe AI will put social media on steroids. This is my biggest fear. AI is ultimately a tool. It's no different than nuclear power. You can use it, drop a bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and kill people, destroy future generations. You can use it for producing electricity and doing all the good stuff. For us, it's up to us humans. The same is with AI. We can use it to kill people even in a worse way, I would say, or at least in as bad a way as nuclear power would. Because if you make them lonely, I mean, there is nothing left. I personally believe it's so badly ingrained, it's so badly or goodly is a different issue. It's so strongly ingrained in us that we have to talk to each other. And now we have kids who are, rather than talking to their parents, the parents are on their smartphones while eating dinner, and so are kids. And AI will do that on steroids, because you will have now suddenly robots, chatbots, who would be talking to you. And of course, that causes problems. Even in marriages or partnerships, that will cause problems, because yeah, my wife and I always have disagreements every now and then. And if I go to a chatbot, Ganga, and Ganga is saying, "You are always right, Alok. You're so handsome. You're so right. Forget about your wife. What do you think will happen? I'm human. I'm emotional." So obviously, this creates more of these issues. By the way, this is also not new. 1966 is the first time when the first chatbot came out. The chatbot came out. It was produced again at MIT by Professor Weizenbaum. He called it Eliza. And he called it Eliza because if you remember, in My Fair Lady, there is Professor Higgins who is teaching this flower girl, Eliza, how to speak English correct. So that's what his aim was, to teach a computer how to speak English correct. And Eliza, he realized very quickly that it will be rudimentary. They do not have enough computing power to train Eliza and so on and so forth. But of course, this was his passion. He was trying his best. But still, his secretary and his students and staff got so enamored by Eliza that his secretary would so often say to him, "Professor Weizenbaum, can you leave the office? I want to talk to Eliza in private." And this is when you look at Eliza and you hear what Eliza was able to do, and it was so trivial that you say, "Oh my God, we humans are really, really in for something bad because we get very emotional about this." So that's what my biggest fear is. And
Yeah.
in
So,
India,
Alok,
no.
So Alok, on both, just to leave it on a positive note before we move to Alok as a human, I have this, and I read your book and other books. I read I caution you. I'm going to end with a positive. So there was a cartoon published in late 1800s in London Times, where just when the printing press was invented or became popular,
Yeah,
was picture of a book, the train which you mentioned, 1880s or something, in which there were people sitting reading books, right? And the title said "End of Society as We Know It," because people thought people will not chat on their commute while commuting, and this thing will end. So I would say that human beings adapt very, very well. And like you said about nuclear weapon, others, when things happen, till now the track record is quite good. One may find some flaws in it. And as
yeah,
far as job loss goes, today there are not many people typing, right? Or who knew in 1900, even in 1900, that we will have 50 million plus programmers in the world. So new jobs come up, right? So while apart from your population calculation, there is we can't predict what other things human beings will do. What will be the new AI? What will be the new entertainment? What will be the new
yeah,
music? So, till now the score in my view is more in favor of humans than against humans, and they've
yeah.
evolved that way for a very, very long time. So
And again, I don't want to be negative. And I completely agree. The thing that we are very good as a human society is that once we realize that there is something really wrong, there is enough movement to fix it. And I'll give you a non-technology example. In 1960s, both India and China went through famine. And India lost about anywhere from 30 to 40 million people in famine. They died. In China, we don't even know. Probably the number was much higher. And the world got really worried that, look, we'll lose a lot of people in the undeveloped countries like India and China to famine. And then came the Green Revolution because yeah. So once we decide that this is a problem and we need to fix it, we humans are able to fix it. And again, going to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, once the world realized that, look, how much destruction can be caused, we haven't had, fortunately, any such further incidents, right? I mean, we know that it's mutual assured destruction of the society. So first of all, I completely agree with you. All I'm trying to bring out is what worries me and why I'm writing about my latest article was AI will aggravate loneliness in India. So extremely, because Indians are as, if not more, addicted to social media today, to Facebook. I mean, the maximum number of Facebook users are those in India. Of course, India has a large population, not taking that away. So I think as long as we understand it, as long as society begins to do it, I'm the last person who would advocate too many laws and rules and regulations, but yet that's what the governments are for. And already Dr. Bharati has said, look, we should, just like we have on cigarettes, that it is harmful for to smoke a cigarette. It can cause this. We should put it that it's social media is harmful for adolescents and teenagers and so on. So I think we'll have to figure that out. So first of all, I completely agree. In terms of job gains, again, you're right that there will be new jobs created. In fact, I wrote just another paper just before the loneliness paper on the unsung heroes of AI, the growth of job annotators in India. As I mentioned, when you're training a child machine, there has to be a trainer who has to train the child machine. So there has to be somebody who has to label data, whether it is somebody's X-ray or it is differentiating between the faces of cats and dogs. And in the book, as well as in this particular paper, I explain more in the paper than in the book, that the number of data annotators by 2050 are likely to be about 15 million worldwide. There are already about 400,000 annotators, out of which 200,000 are in India alone, and another 100,000 are in China, annotating in Chinese and so on, and of course videos. So yes, and there'll be more jobs because of flying cars and because of gene editing and so on.
Yeah, sure. And on that last note, I would say that worrying is what solves. So I'm appreciative, and I asked the question about what are you worried about, but I was saying that human beings worry, human beings get concerned about something and then they fix it. One day they will stop fixing it, but till now, score is to humans. Now, here is the last part, which is Alok. And Alok, I know since I'm asking Alok about Alok, the way to break through your intelligent self and get to your internal self is to not give you time. So this is a rapid fire, right? And you have to start answering in 5 seconds. You may take longer. Something that others don't know about you. Most of the others people don't know about
you. I think most of them do not know how strongly the builder tendency is within. I think the builder aspect people don't understand. For example, even it's not only being an entrepreneur. I actually have built houses. I designed the house on 1/4 inch to a foot scale. Then I go to somebody to put it on paper, to put it on CAD/CAM drawings, and then I've hired individual contractors, 14, 15 contractors, one electrician, one plumber, one concrete guy to build these houses. I used to do that in New York City. I mean, in New York, 40 miles north of New York City, where IBM Research Division is. I've done a couple of times out here also. I don't have the time to do it, but there is a very strong art, which is being an engineer and being a builder, which I think people often don't know about.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Who is the person you admire the most?
I think by and large, there are two, and one of them is definitely Alan Turing. I mean, I would recommend people not only see his bio picture, The Imitation Game, but know more about Alan Turing. The best award given in computer science, which is, you can call it like the Field Medal in math or a Nobel Prize in sciences, is a Turing Award. And Alan Turing was a very, very thoughtful, interesting person. I mean, there are many such people I admire a lot. Most of them happen to be researchers. Fortunately,
I know your book was probably, if I remember correctly, you acknowledge your book or dedicate your book to Turing, right? If I remember correctly,
yes.
Right?
And yes, absolutely. I have in the memory of Alan Turing for all his help and wisdom for human society.
Got it. Next one, favorite vacation spot?
I don't take too many vacations. I take vacations only when I'm forced to, which is primarily by my wife. And now the children have grown up, so they would also push. But if I were to choose a favorite vacation spot, I would still put it as Rishikesh is one place I would like to go. My vacation spots would be cold places where you can go and just look at the nature and try and meditate and get out of the day-to-day world. So would not be.
I presume you don't have a tattoo, right? You don't have a tattoo, do you?
I don't have a tattoo. I don't have a tattoo, permanent or temporary. I do not have a tattoo.
If you were to get a tattoo, what would it be? A picture or a name or a quote?
First of all, I think that's a wrong presumption. I don't think I'll ever have a tattoo. I do very strongly believe that a human body is like a temple and tattoo is a desecration of temple. But if I were to have a tattoo, it would be, first of all, it would be only temporary, so made out of mehendi or one of those things which will go away. And secondly, it will be something completely abstract. Abstract in the sense that I believe that we humans, although we are of course much better than animals, that we can think logically, we can say A and not A cannot be true at the same time. But eventually, nature doesn't say A and not A cannot be true at the same time. Or from nature's perspective, Alok could be sitting in California and could be simultaneously in Andromeda galaxy out of the Milky Way galaxy. So it would be something abstract. I'll have to think about it as to what I would.
And my last question, Alok, is what is a word or a phrase you would relate to Alok?
I think I would say three things: passion, grit, and humility. Passion to achieve whatever you want.
I would agree with them. I would agree with them, by the way, knowing you for so long. Yeah.
Passion to achieve whatever you set out to achieve. Grit is the perseverance, the dedication that, look, this is what I wanted to achieve. I'm going to do my level best. I don't control it. I'm going to do my level best to achieve it. I may lose 100 times. That's okay. Whatever it is, because eventually I'll die anyway. So who cares? And eventually humility. I mean, whatever you achieve, you achieve. We all achieve things while we are living. We all die. So by nature, we should be humble as people, as a society, and not arrogance. I think arrogance kills, just like I think anger kills people.
Very, very nice. So Alok, I'm sure, like I enjoyed this discussion with you, like I do every time. This time I had the privilege to share it with the broader audience. I hope audience also enjoyed the discussion, the far-reaching areas we covered. And the purpose was not to give a prescriptive answer, but try to see the world from your eyes and try to see who you are, Alok. So I appreciate your time and appreciate your insights and look forward to seeing you again. But thank you very much, Alok.
Yeah, thanks, Puneet. And I enjoyed it too. Likewise, so every time we talk, these are very interesting questions you bring out. Some I have thought about, many I haven't. So it always makes me actually look inside also as much as outside. So thanks for having me. It was a great discussion. Thank you.
And thank you, Alok. Thank you.